I just get nervous when I talk to you, dude.
What? What?
All the time. Yeah,
Get out of here.
you're still like you're forever gonna be the guy that I learned Magento from on the TV. No matter what. It's a weird
That
thing.
is
It's a weird.
yeah, man. It's funny. I mean funny, haha. But it's like it's
Funny, not funny. Are you a TikTok guy? Because I see that on TikTok all the time.
I TikTok is interesting to me. I only started looking at TikTok, within the last year, and I'm not really a participant. I think I actually commented for the first time on someone's video because I think some of the content is created a little disingenuously, just purely for the purpose of engagement. and I'm like, yeah, that's the thing that you've just this video of which is really just some random background, behind some text. I'm like, this thing that you're saying, this is wrong. And how I hate it when people are wrong on the internet.
No, I'm not sure I can stand here and allow this blasphemy to continue. I think that everybody on TikTok is being entirely is that a word? Ingenuous? Genuine?
Genuine. Yeah. It's like disingenuous. I mean, it's one of those words like underwhelmed, overwhelmed, but no one's ever actually just whelmed.
Exactly.
I'm glad we're back together again to have these important discussions.
That's exactly how I feel right now. I just feel whelmed.
Man, is the shack the same dimensions as when it was originally built?
The dimensions have grown.
Is this still the shack? Okay.
So this is actually the garage.
Okay, I had a feeling.
The shack project has been officially sunset. You say sunsetted? Sunset.
I think both are acceptable, but sunset.
I had to pay a guy to demolish it and pull it out of the backyard.
No! Yeah. You put all that work into it, man.
I know. After all that work, and it was like my wife hated it. It was like really, it was like a super eyesore. And
I would say that supersedes it. We're having a pod delivered like literally right now.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's for because we're renovating, and like we've been like waiting to renovate for this house that we bought at the beginning of the year so we've just been buying materials while we could because
I think I lost you for
chain.
Like 2 seconds. You said we're renovating. We've been.
So we've.
Did I lose you?
All this we've got literally tons of materials sitting in the garage that we had to get out of the way. You're frozen.
Can you hear me? Am I frozen?
Oh wait, crap! I'm still on internet.
Oh yeah, it's because it's funny. I lost you for like a half a second, and then you couldn't hear me. But I guess you can hear me now.
Okay. Hey, sorry. I just realized. So we had because I live on an island, so we had a power outage and for no reason. It's perfectly sunny here. But I just realized I was on my cellular.
Oh, that's hilarious. Wait, so
connection
you use your cellular from your computer, like you?
Yes, it just tethers. Yep. And actually, it was funny. I had to. So when the very first Magento Association Connect event, the very first our coming out we're finally doing something.
Yeah.
When I was emceeing it, and I had it was my first use of my very at the time amateurish home studio setup, and
picture
literally
of the board, the sound boards on the wall, right?
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
But all the preparation that went into it, and I was emceeing it, and I had to do the intro. And I'm kidding you, the cable internet here has been awesome, and it'd been awesome literally for the entirety of at the time the entirety of the pandemic. We're working from home, never gone down once. Literally failed 2 minutes before I was supposed to go on. But having done many events, I was prepared, so I jumped right onto my cell phone. So it's a good backup.
Nice.
But it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Anyway, you been all right?
You have a facility with which you switch between Wi-Fi and cell signals that is probably slightly above average. It sounds like.
No, it's. I wish I could tell you like, oh, I've got an auto switching router failover, but no, it's literally just going up to the little Wi-Fi icon in my
Dude, I
Mac
talked to
header
David Alger. I talked to David Alger once about his internet. You know David Alger, right?
Yeah, of course.
I talked to him once about his internet setup because I was thinking about moving to like a more rural area. And I was like trying to figure out, I want to get some land like out in the country and go crazy. And so I was trying to figure out internet. And this guy, man, he gave me this guy splits his T-Mobile and routes it. And he built a custom thing that talks to the cell tower and like all sorts of crazy.
David's one of those really, he's just one of those genuinely, 100% thoroughly through and through frustrating people that you meet in this industry, because he's, absolutely smart as hell, couldn't be nicer.
He's significantly smarter than any, like when you talk to him, you go, this guy's smarter than me. I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to accept it.
But having I've been, being involved with him at Magento U, from basically the founding days, it was great because you'd see him sit there and people would be going like threshing out some, architectural thing. And you could tell he's got the answer, but he just sit there patiently and wait for it to. He's like, actually, I think it's kind of like this, it's a little bit Vinay-esque in terms of its kindness and its emphasis on process and learning. What you describe about his technical setup is this is the same guy who, built his house. He's sitting there creating concrete forms and pouring it and it's doing
unreal.
All the stuff. Talk about. So, isn't this what you love about this industry, though? You've really seen it because you've been directly involved with people in their careers. It's amazing to me how many people, how many just wonderful people there are in this space, and that's the great thing about a good self-sustaining ecosystem is the good operators. Hopefully, they stay in and they rise to the top. And if you're a scallywag, you're out.
I missed the timing on this, but I was going to say when we were talking about David building his own house, I was going to say, you talk about a full stack developer.
Man, I did not mean to take that. That was a solid reference there.
He built the house, the networking layer, know what I'm saying, the whole. But yeah, man, it's a cool space. I'm officially getting out of the recruiting business.
Yep.
I decided 2 weeks ago, I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was like, and it's funny because as I've been working on the new thing, I've been talking to different people, and I talked to a couple people developers who I was describing my process of where I'm like, I was wanting to make a change for a while, but it's like, when you have something that's paying the bills, you know how to do it. It's not that hard. Even though you're kind of, there's going to be a strong Magento Shopware tie-in here in a second. So hold on to your seatbelt.
I'm just here for the bananas.
So it's how to do it. It's easy to do, but you're feeling dissatisfied, and you're like, well, I really want to do something else, and then you finally decide to take the jump and you do it, and then hopefully it goes well, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. So I was describing my own personal process to somebody who had actually had gone from Magento into doing some cool machine learning AI stuff, and he said. I may be mixing it up because a lot of people in Magento, they're doing Shopware now, they're doing whatever, they're doing different things. And the person I was talking to said that's exactly how I felt about doing the Magento development and moving into something else. And some people are super happy doing their Magento dev, and that's great. But there's a significant portion of the market that
Well, there's I maybe I can. Intuit where this is going, but I think there's a couple categories. Magento, especially well, I remember in the days of when we were doing the Magento 2 beta back in 2015, I believe it was. We did one in the U.S., did one in. I mean, there were a couple of preview events, but then we did one in the U.S. We did one in, and this was really right leading up to the release. One in the U.S., one in Europe, in the area outside of Berlin where the eBay offices were. And I just remember Alistair Stead, who I always just found to be also profoundly intelligent.
Smart. Yeah.
I think back then that was, he was still part of Invika, or the company that
might have been Session
acquired.
Digital.
I was going to say it might have still been Session at that point, but I just remember him getting up and he just stood up and he's like, look, great, you're modernizing things. Just like, but you've got to make this more enjoyable of a developer experience. Because he's like, I have great engineers working on who we bring in to work on Magento, and they're so far
they
their
cry
level
themselves
of ability
to sleep at night.
Right, so they feel like they're being held back by the environment in which they're required to work. And it turns out I don't know that problem was actually solved by M2. In fact, it might have been much worse.
This brings us to Shopware. The problem was solved by Shopware, essentially.
Well,
now, I think that I remember tweeting, and this was not. I've never looked at the code. I just sort of see the communities, and I see people getting excited about things, and I go, Shopware is the new Magento. I tweeted that at one point. This is my little claim to fame. That was before you had made the move, and then when you made the move, I was like, okay, there's some strong parallels here.
Yeah, and I think it's not really betraying any state secrets to say that like that tweet got so when I showed up at Shopware and this was already screenshotted into Dex, and I had to see it for the next several months. But
wait! Are you serious about that?
Oh yeah. No, the leadership at Shopware have always have paid attention to what's going on. Of course, in e-commerce in general, and especially what is needed in Europe, but always kind of took cues from the good and the bad of the Magento world. And the thing is, at the level where a lot of us in this space have been over the last decade or more of our professional pursuits, where you could basically you could take these people once a developer or an architect or really anyone in the space understands the e-commerce domain and the challenges of e-commerce domain, the development or project management, all this other stuff it's kind of a it doesn't really matter which platform you're using, but you certainly want to use the platform that makes it easiest to make the best use of you're an agency, your inventory, which is your hours.
Yeah, there are a lot of wrong ways to use any given platform or tool. Like I remember when I started using, Xdebug and PHP. By the way, when I started learning Magento from you on Magento U, I believe I was using NetBeans at the time.
Yeah.
Did you use NetBeans in your demo?
Earliest,
okay.
So the very first Magento U class, man, if you and I could also talk about this. We were like, it was maybe the first, maybe the second, but we wanted, because we wanted to reduce the setup time, because even though it was a week-long class, it was a struggle to get through all 5 days.
Yeah.
And so we provided a VM, right? And I think this is 2011, right? So VM and IDEs there's still some rough edges. It was sort of
a little rough.
But we provided, and I forget which virtual machine we were using, but it had it had NetBeans built in. It was just impossibly slow. It was just so frustrating. And NetBeans was is great. It was fantastic as an open source IDE, but certainly from the retrospective lens of PHP Storm, oh my gosh.
But when I started using Xdebug and using what was it called, Magento, I think was the PHP Storm plugin, right? And then you go you go, oh my gosh, like something that took me 10 hours to attempt to debug while crying in a corner now takes me 10 minutes because so, and then fast forward 2 years and you run across somebody and you go, oh, you don't use Xdebug? Like what, like,
Yeah.
so with any platform, and like, for example, on the environment setup, I'm talking to my buddy Damien, who's into like GitHub code spaces.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with code spaces? It's
Um,
basically it's basically like a way to get a dev environment up and running. It's integrated directly into what's it called? The Visual Code, the Sublime Microsoft version of Sublime, that visual
visual editor, visual VCE,
yeah,
right?
Such a weird name. Yes.
Visual Studio.
Visual Studio. So it ties in directly to that, right? And so my buddy is like, yeah. And everybody has experienced the pain of, you're new to a dev environment, you spend 5 days getting your dev environment set up, and now there's a tool that can do it all instantly. So it's like basically what you're saying. It's like there's so many ways to use any given platform better to actually enjoy it. But at the same time, the platform itself also matters too. Like if the code is clean, if they're making good progress actually building out features, and they're not just stumbling through technical debt, and da 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 da. So it's kind of both at the same time, right?
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that I think a lot of us intuited, I was actually just checking my Twitter feed to see if I'd said anything about it, but I think we all saw that there was there would be this emergence of we figured out that over time, like the progression of editing a website, it was like maybe you were just nanoing stuff via secure shell tunnel, or then maybe you're definitely like Dreamweaver was so slick back in the day, and I think this was even pre Adobe acquisition of Macromedia. But it was so cool because all of a sudden, like, I don't have to like edit here in this context and then go into my file system and have like my FTP SFTP client and upload the thing to the server, refresh over here to see if it's working. No, it's the FTP SFTP interface is built right into Dreamweaver.
I can just do it right in here. Yeah,
that was the bee's knees. And then of course and we've come so far, but now the next era is these online environments. I mean, we had a partner meeting on the Shopware campus in Germany last week. And I'm sitting there. I wasn't even expecting this update from Daniel Nogo, who's one of our amazing product leaders. We have this whole thing now with our front end. You can just essentially pull in a template, so you can create a new sales channel in your Shopware instance, and we have a space. You can just invoke a template, and it might even have some sort of predefined design elements, or it could be bone stock, whichever you want. But then you just click a button and it fires up in Stack Blitz, and you have your entire
what's Stack Blitz?
So Stack Blitz is basically you have this online editing stack that just is breathed into existence. You don't need anything running locally other than your browser. It's so fascinating.
So this is probably similar.
Seeing this happen.
This is probably similar to Code Spaces. I'm starting to pay attention to this stuff, and there's another one that's some other. So this is probably a version of that. It's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, guarantee you in the next certainly the 5 to 10 years, if we look at the developers, working, coming into the professional world, then their experience, like they will never know the woes. They will likely never know the woes of virtualized environments, or locally virtualized environments, of maintaining your own local development stack. It's all just going to be there, and I think we'll see this continuing trend where you have functional endpoints, and no one really cares almost where they are. You're just stringing together experiences. I mean, this is not exactly what like someone like Commerce Tools is doing, but they provide these commerce endpoints and you just string together whatever functionality you need to compose. I think Kelly over there would be happy for me using that term, compose the experiences that are needed both on the front end and the back end. So I'm always fascinated at how quickly this industry moves. I mean, just this morning I'm looking at a conversation I think between Christian Munch and Vinay, and they're having this discussion, and I kind of get what they're talking about, but I almost commented, I'm like, it's clearly been about a decade since I've written client code because I'm completely lost.
Yeah, I've like kind of obviously strayed from being an actual developer for some time, and it's one of those things you feel weird about, and I'm trying to start embracing my whatever my role is of whatever not being a developer, and trying to kind of understand, like the code spaces thing is interesting to me. I don't understand it very well, but I go, oh, that's kind of cool. And so then I try to start to grok some of that like segment of, the ecosystem or whatever. I'm talking to my buddy Damien about this Kubernetes thing he's doing, and I'm going, that's wild. And I'm trying, but then I think I've also had phases where if I talk to somebody about something, I want to completely understand everything they're talking about. Yeah. Or like if I don't, I feel it's like an ego thing or whatever. But I'm trying to get to where it's just like I don't,
getting comfortable with new technology was, I mean, that was me when I was preparing to teach one of the earlier the beta version of the Magento 2 Fundamentals of Development course, the one that I taught so many times so well on like 5 continents. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Let me. I guess it's time for me to start learning Magento 2. And then I'm getting, I'm like, what the hell is Composer? and it was just, and of course, if you were, so this is like circa 2014, 2015. If you were a actual working developer, at the time, you obviously you had grown up and you had understood what Compose was. You understood package management. You understood basically the advances of web dev, especially PHP web dev in the preceding 10 years. But in Magento 1, we ended up in this very comfortable, lucrative silo and had to break out of it. And
that's a very good way to describe it.
That iteration is just it will be a persistent force in this space for a very long time.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with, since M2 started, with the lifetime that M1 will have. And I mean, I talked to somebody just the other day who's still on M1. There's a crew of people they've got real businesses running on it, so they're continuing to maintain it. It's this obviously very, funny little thing. But at the same time, it's not a funny thing in the sense that you've got people with real businesses, whatever they're doing, 10 million, 20 million, who knows? And it's like business software has a very long lifetime. If there's a business running, there's people on OS Commerce. Yep. There's literally people on OS Commerce. Yeah. Yep. So it's just funny.
So one of the strongest indications I had, and I do still try and balance my previous role and my new role, but I think objectively it's worth stating. I mean, at Shop Talk in Vegas this year, I went around and just chatted with a lot of the tech partners that I had known over the years in the Magento space. And, these are just to kind of ask, the question I asked was like, okay, so how is Magento business, right? And I'm not going to get into the response about their trends, the trends that they were seeing. But it occurred to me afterwards, I was like, wait, I didn't ask maybe the most a relevant question, which is, what percentage of your revenues are derived from M1 sites today, like 2022 compared to M2? And pretty much, and these are aggregators. These are pretty substantial, widely used, widely subscribed to services across, every kind of technical corner, feature corner in the space. And pretty much every one of them were like, yeah, 50% or more of our revenue is still coming from Magento 1. And
wild.
Yeah. That was fascinating to me. And let me tell you, Caitlin, that excited me because I'm like, woohoo, that's my most addressable market at Shopware. And I felt great. And it wasn't until about a couple months ago that as I was starting, as I continued to try and help build business here in the US, I'm like, I was failing to consider the inertia of a frictionless, it's there, it's mature, it's running, it's making money software. So with these platforms, these merchants and brands that are platformed still on M1, there are plenty of zombie M1 installs out there that probably, if they ever care to update, they absolutely should roll off to like a Shopify or WooCommerce or something. Their revenues are small, their concerns are small. They really need something that's self-maintaining, right? That's a great home for them. But there are evidently so many substantial businesses running M1, and it's going to take a lot to unstick them. So unfortunately, my work is a little bit more difficult than just like showing up and being like, hey, by the way, we're your next home. But it also is a pain. Sorry, just one more point. It's really unfortunate for the industry because these merchants, even if they're not making a relatively small ongoing investment in maintaining their M1 shop, if they care to build features that exist in like current platforms, M2, Shopware 6, others, they're basically throwing money in the old jalopy that they're going to have to basically, money's going to be wasted when they finally go over to a new platform. And there's always the risk that another Shoplift or something like that comes along, and then you've got problems. The good thing is hosts now, I think anyone doing significant business on Magento 1 or Magento 2 or really any platform like that in this space, hosting companies are pretty sharp, and they're always on the ball with WAFs and things to mitigate.
Yeah. So here's my question. So you talk to developers that have started looking at Shopware. There's a level of excitement. There's a level of grassroots enthusiasm, right? But then what I'm wondering is, then they brought you on board. So I'm going, and I've talked to some people that are like, dude, Shopware is about to pop in the US market like nobody's business. But I'm going, okay, is it And the other thing I hear a lot is the German side of things, right? So you've got that strong German engineering, which is amazing. But then I hear a lot of people say, a lot of people speak German. There's German in the Slack. There's a lot of German in the documentation. Can we get these people to speak no, I'm just kidding. But
this is Germany. Speak English.
You obviously speak a good amount of German, right?
Jawohl.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You must really enjoy that aspect of it, because I've been hearing you speak German randomly for little random snippets here and there for years.
Well, German listeners who've heard me speak German over the years would say, yes, he speaks German poorly. No, I do okay. The accent okay. The vocabulary sucks. It's an analogous problem to taking Magento outside of North America. Just the software out of the box, the software had just obviously North American opinions on things like address fields, et cetera. And the further you get away from, it's a terrible term, but quote, the West. So like looking at North America,
love how Australia
Europe
is part of the West.
Yeah, well, Australia's a whole different topic. But so you go in Japan and you have it's a whole completely different needs. The biggest difference I would use when I would talk about the challenges of taking any platform anywhere outside of its home market is, as simple as in a lot of at the time. So looking back in 2015, 2016, speaking at events, there's always a fundamental assumption, like a customer in the Magento world was identified by an email account, and there was a required part of a valid entity,
right?
And it was a basically a unique key for that customer. But if you're trying to sell in Japan or China and you want to use Magento, like they don't use email, like their identity is managed in an app, and now we're getting more and more used to that in the West. But again, that's just an illustration. It's an illustration of the challenge. And in the case of Shopware, I'm glad to say it wasn't really that much of a lift to make some of the changes that we needed to. The biggest thing was taxes, because when I showed up at Shopware about a year and a half ago, the administration of at the product level of tax display, so it was possible to enter in the tax rates, but the administration was really from the perspective of there being a VAT. So it was kind of cumbersome. And then the default templates, so the native like the out of the box display, anywhere there's a product price, it was always inclusive of tax. And that's just something that we've had to go back and remediate. And then of course that goes hand in hand with making sure that it was easy to plug in, and that we have integrations for the tax compliance vendors like TaxJar, and, TaxJar, Avalara, and Vertex, because as a platform, we don't even want to be, and we don't want our merchants to be responsible for tax compliance when that has become an industry unto itself. And the same thing is starting to happen, I think, with privacy, as we start to see states individually come up with their own specifications about right to be forgotten and data storage and pseudonymization, et cetera.
Right. So on a future level, that makes sense. I'm really curious about the dev community, because I feel like that's the thing I keep hearing over and over. Is the documentation? There's a lot of German, a lot of people in the Slack or whatever. And so what's the deal there? We're starting to. Can Ben Marks decree that now and henceforth they shall all speak English?
Ben Marks decrees nothing. So I'm happy to say, even when I showed up at Shopware, they were already well underway of going English first as a company, and they are now. I mean, it has been English first. The executive team even went through like proper C-level executive English coaching. As we start to bring in, again, this was well underway before my arrival.
Because obviously if they just want to stay in Germany and do that, they would do great. But you can tell, this is not based on it, that they want to hit other markets. I mean, you can tell that's the idea.
And I know the French probably lament this, but I guess because of good cinema, the French may take umbrage with that. But good cinema, good shows, because of good so much popular media is in English, like American English. That's English has become the international language. So even within Europe, like if an Italian business is trying to speak with a Polish business, likely they're going to be communicating in English. And that is what it is now. So we've worked.
I would just say this is not like I'm an American. This is like I'm talking to a developer from Argentina who is like, hey, it would be nice if I could communicate a little better with in English type of a thing. So I just want to put that out.
So as far as I know, I mean, I've heard less about the someone trying to find documentation and sort of getting to what they need, and then seeing that it's in German. We're of course we're growing our the community, the ecosystem is growing into markets outside of core Europe. So we're getting into Nordics. Certainly, growing in North America, and I've got my eyes on a couple of markets in South America. But so it naturally
sites in the U.S. Like, are there a number of Shopware sites in the U.S.? Or?
There are. They're all, there's like 3,400, I think, that show up on like Built With or Wappleizer. Those,
Holy cow.
so those, yeah, but that's Shopware 5. So the jump from Shopware 5 to Shopware 6 is it's pretty reminiscent of M1 to M2. And I actually do have, we've got a pretty healthy pipeline right now. I was just in that meeting this morning. We do have one enterprise customer. We have on Shopware 6. That site is currently being built, so I'll have like my first real case. The easier cases that I'll have, and they may even go live before that, are European merchants already on Shopware 6 opening sales channels in the U.S. And that's what I'm looking for. And that's really that's what I've been indexing on for so long, is trying to get those earliest customer cases here, because that's really the kind of coverage that, as we know, we're in the Magic Quadrant for the third year, moved pretty had a pretty big move this year. So we're doing the right things, but again, even me putting myself in the shoes of a technology buyer, at a merchant, I'm going to say, okay, like, where are your, I get that you guys are huge in Europe, but where are your use cases for the U.S.? And that's what I'm trying to provide for right now. So
that makes sense.
So the after we look at just the presence of German and trying to make sure that we have like natural English resources here, that we have a product that out of the box you can configure and demo well in the U.S. The developer experience in general. I mean, this is something I've checked with agencies that do both Magento and Shopware. And on average, there's no universally true statement when it comes to suitability of a platform. Just in general,
there's no universally true statements in life.
Well, that is a fair point. That is a fair point. We can have a follow-up conversation on that, I think. But in general, what I hear is, Shopware it's less complicated. It's easier to develop for. Doesn't mean that it's always right. Like if the consideration is just between like Magento and Shopware, and whether it's it's Shopware 6, but Magento 1 or Magento 2, it's really a question of, like, you do still have to stop and say, okay, what's the functionality that I need, and then what are the kinds of customizations that I need? Because Magento 2 has complexity in order to make more things architecture, like configurable naturally architecturally. Shopware, what Shopware did was really rely on Symfony framework underneath for Shopware 6. So Shopware 6 was a complete like rewrite from scratch, and they really emphasized, look, hey, like, so for the event system, the venting system in Shopware 6, it really is just basically a facade. I'm not saying this architecturally, like, it's not a programming facade, but it basically it is literally, that functionality is derived pretty much directly from Symfony.
It's like a super light layer on top of Symfony.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that comes at the expense of maybe being able to swap out. I mean, you could probably use Composer and swap in another eventing solution, but but again, the likelihood that you're going to ever do these kinds of deep customizations such that you could justify adding complexity to the core application for the sake of configures, it really is Yagni. I mean, you ain't going to need it. And that's why I think Shopware is a little bit easier when it comes to building and maintaining, upgrading. But I'm not trying to present that as universally true and universally the right choice for everyone.
I mean, and I'll say this for you, because I mean, you obviously have your Shopware hat on. I think you do a good job of not being overly biased and stuff like that. But this is exactly what I hear, is that when a developer looks at Shopware, they're going to go, I like its code base is cleaner, everything's cleaner. They feel like this is exactly what I hear. And I think that developer attention, like, in some sense, like, the history of technology, I mean, the story of technology in general is go where the developers are. When the developers are a leading indicator of where the industry is moving. Like, so if developers love something, now, does that mean immediately some U.S. merchant is going to move $100 million site onto Shopware because his developer thinks it's cool. No, right? They need the business case to be made.
Right.
They need to see examples. They need da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But I think it is that leading indicator, and I feel like when Shopware pops in the U.S., it's going to pop hard and fast, and it's going to be like an exponential.
I think
type,
that's my operating theory, and I think that's a pretty significant factor behind Carlyle and PayPal's not insignificant investment in us earlier this year. Is that yes, if we're doing this right, we're going to get it.
That's wild.
You didn't know about the investment?
No, sorry. So I've been out of the loop for a while, but I remember there was like $100 million investment? I just didn't remember who was behind it. So I didn't make the PayPal connection.
Yeah. It was interesting in that Carlyle and PayPal came in together. But also the cool thing is, like, even at that level, the valuation attached to that, which remains private, is but I've been a part of it. It's reasonable. It's not this.
You'll tell us right now.
Absolutely. But I mean, if you saw, like, we've seen other platforms out there, if they had $100 million raise, Series A raise, which, by the way, was the first in Shopware's 22-year history. It was bootstrapped by the two brother co-founders who founded it when they were teenagers. It's always in the black.
They seem really cool.
They're great.
I love
here.
This thing that there's these two brothers that are super cool.
And they're not. I mean, they're kind of yin and yang. I mean, one is the design and sort of the philosophy. Well, they're both philosophically open source, community, all in. But like, they're just the most humble people ever, and not looking for they don't want to go buy a private island. They want to take this thing that they've built and that they've helped build along with this growing ecosystem, and see it continue to make a difference, especially at a time when things
buy a private island.
And then maybe, I don't know. But no, actually, I asked them when I was joining, I was like,
do I get a private island?
I'm like, what's the exit strategy here? And they were like, we're working but again, they're not looking for that. They weren't looking for a splashy valuation. So it was reasonable, and they kept, even with $100 million, they kept a super majority of the control.
I love it.
So
can I just sit?
I like it because we're not building for an exit. It means we can still build for our market.
Yeah, and by the way, in this day and age, that's so rare. Everyone is building for an exit, and except for Elon Musk, like when people have. We'll do another conversation on that. But when people have genuine conviction about what they're building, there's something incredibly rare and beautiful about that in this day and age. And I have to say, I think it's so cool. Seeing you move to Shopware made me happy on a number of levels, because a lot of people have moved from Magento to other ecosystems, right? Whether you're talking about Magento employees, Magento ecosystem, a lot have moved into SaaS, which is fine. SaaS is great. It's practical. They make a shit ton of money. Cool. I have this whole meme where I like to troll BigCommerce, but I think BigCommerce is brilliant. I have a buddy that started working there.
Aaron?
Aaron, I'm having lunch with Aaron tomorrow, and another friend of mine in Austin who started working for them.
Cool.
And I think they're brilliant, and I think SaaS is cool, right?
Yep.
But there was a time. Remember, open source wins. Yoav said that there was a time when open source was sort of popular, and now SaaS is popular.
Yeah.
But people who genuinely you could have, I'm sure, gone to some SaaS company, right? But the fact that you are the fact that you're with a true hardcore open source company is really cool. Like, it just makes me happy that
thanks.
You're still doing that.
It was. I mean, I knew it was time for me to step away from Magento. There were some things I'd really wanted to achieve that it just was clear I wasn't going to be able to get through. I'm pretty, I feel pretty good about the difference that I made over the years, and and hopefully people remember me as a person of integrity and a person they can trust with their feedback.
Because I talk to a lot of people about a lot of stuff, and one of the things you find privately is that people talk a little shit privately about a given person for whatever reason. Every person I have ever talked to says good things about you behind your back when I'm talking to them one-on-one. I'm not talking about 90% of people. I'm talking about 100%. And I tweeted about that recently, and it's just who you are, and it's why people love you. I'm not trying to make it awkward or make you feel embarrassed, but
no, it's
that to say that.
I mean, it's just, well, it's an outcome. I mean, I'm a people pleaser anyway. It's problematic. It makes it hard for me to say no. It makes me hard for me to not put people in a tough position. But with a little maturity, you realize sometimes no, or sometimes a critique is actually that's a better kindness that you can do than trying to pretend that all things are okay and or that any task is possible. But it's really, for me, it's an outcome of just if as long as I'm listening, and as long as people trust me, it gives me a pretty it gives me a lot of edge, a competitive edge when I'm trying to help us make a difference, Shopware make a difference in this marketplace, which by and large is moving. We're that convergence of API only or SaaS, and then the open source players who index on, these guys are over here, and it really comes down to TCO. Their proposition is hey, your TCO is less risky with us. Now the trade-off there is that customization, especially when you have complex feature requirements, it becomes a little more cumbersome. And then over on the other end, you've had the Magentos and other PrestaShop and other platforms where it's you have total control, which is both great and scary, and introduces a little more risk around TCO. But we're all trying to converge towards balancing the perfect balance of configuration, customization capacity, and reliability. And automation of deploying new features. So so in this regard, I mean, the pendulum has definitely swung over towards the SaaS and API providers, because because people, I think, had this great the all the potential of what you could do over here, but then there was a lived reality, especially when M2 came along, which part of that morass is I'm responsible for.
It's basically all your fault. I mean,
you can lay it at my feet. I'm gone. No one can fire me now. But now I think it's more important than ever for Shopware to go after and make sure that we have a presence, we have a seat at the table in the e-commerce solutions marketplace, where where people are saying, where do we want this industry to go? I mean, we don't actually sit down at a literal table and have this discussion, but we shape this over time.
Call.
Yeah, we're in too many places, but we shape. This is what we're doing. We're shaping it over the time. If Shopware's not around, then the industry really, I think, is going to trend way towards APIs and SaaS. I mean, even that's where Adobe Commerce is headed. But I think, and it's going to be okay. People will be able, e-commerce will continue to move forward. But I think it's just a little more boring without an open source player there. And the reason I think that is because
100%
is because nothing is more open to innovation, ingenuity, invention, and just tackling the chaos of arbitrary requirements. Like open source, you can do this faster with open source than you can with these other players.
When you don't have a ton of technical debt in the way, we've seen that with Magento. When you have a cleaner code base and you actually can make progress at a nice pace, that's when the magic happens with open source. I do have a hard stop in
8 minutes.
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
I would if I didn't. Yeah, if I didn't
cheated.
have one, I would have loved to go longer. We can do a follow up as soon as you want to. But
Happy
if
to.
there's anything else you wanted to cover in the next couple minutes, any other hard pitches you want to give?
No, I mean, look, it's one of the things that I would love to see in this industry, and this is from, and I try and keep in touch with my peers or with folks at other platforms. I'm it's still the case that no one solution, there is no one ring to rule them all. No one solution is universally applicable, and I'm excited for an era where VC PE money isn't so cheap that the players that are in the marketplace, that are in the space, actually have legitimate businesses with legitimate customers, and as long as these players, I'm a fan of these platforms, like Shopify has a great role. BigCommerce, I don't know anyone that has a better partner game than BigCommerce. What commerce?
Shout out to Daniel.
Yeah, what commerce tools is doing, especially with the Mock Alliance. I mean, brilliant. It's a masterstroke. A little issue with some of the messaging, but there again, it's and even us, with our own messaging, I think we as an industry owe it to the customers, the merchants, and the agencies out there to be very clear about for us to understand ourselves, to be very clear about what we do and don't do well, and to actually try and put that messaging out there. And that kind of thought leadership around that out there to give clarity. Yeah, to give clarity
in English.
And I want to get past things like I want merchants to no longer walk into a pre-sales conversation with I need headless, or I need microservices. No, you need an e-commerce solution. Let's talk about what your needs are, and then we'll decide which one of these architectural patterns it makes sense.
Right.
So,
well, Ben, thanks so much, man. This was a blast, and let's do a follow up literally as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah, I cannot. Yeah, I'm available later this afternoon, tomorrow. No, I'm looking forward to also seeing your next digs. I expect to see you broadcasting from the moon.